Evening is Canadian journalist David KRAYDEN, who joins me, and not for the first time, to talk about the new Online Harms Act being introduced in Canada. Billed as a way to address dangers that children face online, the Act also includes the introduction of stiffer penalties for so-called hate offences, stirring up hate. The bill proposes increasing the maximum punishment for advocating genocide to life imprisonment and allowing sentences of up to 5 years in prison for other hate propaganda offences. David, are you there?
I am, and I'm wearing my "Think While It's Still Legal" T-shirt. I usually have a tie on when I'm on your show, Neil. But this is so important to get this across to an international audience. What's happening in Canada? We are on the verge of losing freedom of speech with this Online Harms Act. I was expecting this thing to be called the Online Safety Act, like it has been called in the UK and Australia. But I think I registered my opprobrium too effectively because they changed the name of it. And they've moved from calling out misinformation and disinformation, and now they're focusing on hate speech. And even something called harm content, which I'm not quite sure what that means. But this bill, as you mentioned at the beginning, can get you life imprisonment for violating what they're calling a harm online offense. And it can get you a $70,000 fine from one of these human rights tribunals, which are going to be recharged after Stephen Harper, the former prime minister, got them out of the hate speech business. So they're going to be up doing their Spanish Inquisition again, and people will be filing complaints from stand-up comics to people on YouTube who are in any way offending them, or if it can be at all purported that they're somehow promoting these three things: hatred, violent extremism, terrorism, or violence itself. And by that definition, Neil, I would be promoting violent extremism by saying anything positive about the Freedom Convoy, because that's how Justin Trudeau described the Freedom Convoy: as misogynist, racist, Nazis, and violent extremists. Although, of course, we all know they engaged in absolutely no violence. But that's what we're up against, Neil. This is frightening. This is a complete betrayal of 500 years of English-speaking democracy from the Magna Carta on. This is a violation of everything Canada has always been about.
David, bear with me. Andrew, this sounds very obviously, it reminds us of the online safety bill in the UK that so many of us have been and continue to be alarmed about. Where are we going? Why are one government after another in supposedly liberal societies seeking to shut down anyone who says anything they don't like the sound of?
Yes, and you're absolutely right. We need to look at that freedom of speech aspects. And it is interesting talking about the change in language, whether it's, the Online Safety Bill as opposed to the Online Harms Act that they're talking about in Canada. But a lot of things they're trying to guard against. And they've got the list of 7, which they talk about here, which you would obviously want to stop. And the one sort of things, basically anything that induces a child to harm themselves. So that sort of stuff, videos on that sort of thing, content that foments hatred. If you're looking at that sort of thing, the question is, where do you draw the line? Because you have to have a society where we can discuss things at the same time, which I like the T-shirt that he's wearing, because you're right, it's make it illegal to think, and then we've got a really big problem in society.
David, you're a journalist, you're working in Canada, but what's happening in terms of other protests in your country? Is this being protested in Parliament? Is it being protested in the mainstream media in Canada?
There has been limited pushback from the legacy media in Canada. I'm not seeing hurrah, hurrah, we're doing something good with this bill. The Conservative opposition in the House of Commons is not taking this bill sufficiently seriously. And they have complained that it's simply, all we have to do is prosecute these evil people out there who are exploiting children. But of course, that's not what this bill is about. That's the veneer. That is how Trudeau is justifying it. And Polyev has complained about the fact that there's this new Digital Safety Commission of Canada, and he's right about that. We've created another arm of bureaucracy, and I don't know if this is going to be a department within a department or an agency, but this is going to be effectively an online censorship bureaucracy in Canada that is going to be responsible for deciding what is hate speech and what is not. And I've always said, if you want to call Karl Marx hate speech, I think you could argue that point. But I don't want to start banning people I disagree with simply because I think they might say something that can be construed by somebody somewhere as hateful. This whole hate speech law should be anathema to democratic values, to freedom of speech.
And when you say that, when you say that, David, an anathema, from where is this attitude coming? In peaceful, peace-loving, supposedly liberal democratic societies like Canada, like New Zealand, like Australia, like the UK, what is underlying this drive now to shut down debate and freedom of speech, which is absolutely at the core of democracy as we've been trained for centuries to understand it? What's driving this?
I think it's clearly this globalist agenda that is being driven by globalist elites who want to destroy those democratic countries, who want to see democracies like the UK, like Canada, like Australia, like New Zealand, and America die. They do not want these countries to continue to exist as bastions of freedom, because that's not what their agenda is about. It's about enslavement. It's about taking over these countries. And Trudeau is simply preaching and introducing this globalist agenda in the same way as we're seeing it in the European Parliament, as we've seen it in your country, and we see it in the United States as well. That's what is going on here. This is a diabolical law. And I don't use that term loosely. This is a very sinister attempt to control how people think and how they speak. And there's even thought crime in this bill, believe it or not, because you can be arrested for merely being suspected of perhaps saying something hateful, perhaps being guilty of harmful speech. And somebody literally can call me out for saying, I think Crayden might say something hateful in the future, so we should take him off the air. I mean, that is something right out of Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, where people used to say, the only time I felt like I could speak my mind or I could speak truth was at midnight lying in bed, because that's when I thought nobody was really listening. And that is what is so horrible about this, is it is going to force people to self-censorship.
Yeah. Andrew Eborn, again, I see you're a lawyer.
Yes.
I've always understood that when it comes to laws that affect the lives of millions of people, it has to be tied down very, very precisely. But it feels that there's this inherent ambiguity in these new legislative offerings, such that they're just open to interpretation. And should that be the case, that laws that could put people behind bars for life are just the subject of context and interest?
You're absolutely right. We touched on this earlier. It's the biggest problem is the label. If you look at the extreme cases, you don't want to have content encouraging people to be violent. You don't want content encouraging people for terrorism or to self-harm. All of those things are abhorrent. The difficulty is when you apply a label, in the same way as we talked about earlier, you say someone's an extremist if they have an opposite view. And that's the real difficulty. It's about that interpretation. As a lawyer, you want to have a precise definition so that you do know that our right to freedom of speech is not going to be affected.
David Crayden, just a last word from you while I still have you. Are the people of Canada, we get away from the media, get away from the politicians, are the people of Canada aware in the way that you would like them to be aware of the implications of this legislation?
I hope they are. It's very difficult to gauge that. There has been a tremendous amount of discussion about this bill since Monday afternoon when it was introduced on social media. There seems to be a general consensus among most journalists that this is a destructive bill, and this is not really about protecting children. or making things safer for children. It's about destroying free speech. So yes, I think Canadians will rally. My concern is this bill will pass before the next election. And once bills pass, they're difficult to repeal. They tend to become vested interests.
Indeed they are. David Crayden, journalist, commentator, thank you so much for this evening. We'll speak again.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand on Guard and being a part of the Kraydens Right channel. If you've watched this episode to this point, you've watched it all. And that's really important for a small station like this. We always say subscribe, hit the bell, be a part of the Crayden resistance. Resolve to resist. That's what we're doing. And if you become a subscriber, if you're a supporter of this station or a member through Substack, through YouTube, and now you can be a local as well, that's so important to us because I couldn't do this without you. I made a decision to become an independent journalist about a year ago because I wanted to bring all of my experience in the military, in journalism, to you. I don't promise anything I can't deliver. I don't offer clickbait. I offer truth. The truth is out there, and it's my job to bring that truth to light and to you. Thanks for being a part of the Kraydens Right resistance, and we'll see you again soon. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need a political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
For everything you did, thank you to put your life on the line for us. You're one of the greatest women I ever met in my life.
A lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but...
Like who?
I don't know who, but...
We feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers.
Oh, no, Mr. Bond. I expect you to be chipped.
I'm a liberal and a proud socialist, Mr. Speaker.
This is a Manchurian candidate. For people who don't understand the expression, I'm not talking about the movie. I'm referring to somebody who can be used as a useful idiot by another country to come out and spout these things off. He is a Marxist.
End your silence. Speak up. For God's sake, stop complying. Start rebelling. They're out to get you if you do not resist.
Goodbye, mercy's sake alive. Looks like we got us a convoy.
Canadian country singer Paul Brandt here. I've been listening with my wife and 2 kids, and we want to say thank you for all you're doing in defense of civil liberties and freedom.
I'll ask the question I posed to you at the start of my round. Will you apologize on behalf of the government for this outrageous invite?
And
stand by the invitation.
Of course, what I said in my initial.
You have no shame.
What? Oh my heavens!
There is nothing they fear like the crystal clear sound of someone somewhere telling the truth.
So it will be a world integrating the physical, biological, and the digital dimensions. So it will be a new world.
Stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. Because I can tell you, you cannot comply your way out of a tyranny.
When did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
And now he's calling them domestic terrorists and wants to freeze their bank accounts. This has been absolutely outrageous. And everybody now is starting to agree that Justin Trudeau has lost this fight.
Press, baby. The press. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing.